please hit that subscribe button.
Hey everybody.
Better suited to win the Stanley Cup this season. If you are new to the channel, Washington Capitals, the Boston Bruins.
Lockout and he scored! And we're live. Hey everybody. So today I want to look at the 10 worst teams in the NHL since the 2005 lockout. So when the league came back in 2005-2006 after missing a full season, there was a lot of changes. A lot of things were different. We had the salary cap, a ton of rule changes. Hockey was just totally different post-lockout than it was prior to the lockout. So I don't want to compare teams from before the lockout to after the lockout or anything like that. So these are the 10 worst NHL teams in the salary cap era after the 2005 lockout. Let's get into it here. Before we get started, I just quickly want to remind everyone to please hit that subscribe button, follow along for all of my hockey content, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoy it, as those likes really help out the channel. Let's get into it here, starting at number 10 with the 2014-2015 Edmonton Oilers. This Oilers team was very bad, as a lot of Oilers teams since the lockout, with the exception of 2006. And then this year's team obviously is pretty good. But for the most part, the Oilers have been a struggling franchise. And this 2014-15 team was probably the worst Oilers team we've seen in the modern era. They went 24, 44, and 14 that season, garnering just 62 points. They were not the worst team in the league that year. They did end up with the number 1 overall pick, which led to Connor McDavid becoming an Edmonton Oiler, and obviously McJesus is the franchise savior. They had a goal differential that year of -85. That was just a really bad team. Next up, number 9, the 2008-2009 New York Islanders. This team was very bad. 26, 47, and 9 on the season. For a -78 goal differential, 61 points on the year, and obviously after that season, they got the number 1 overall draft pick, which led to John Tavares. And obviously, we know what's happened since then. He kind of brought the Islanders back to relevance, and then left for Toronto and is now the captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs. That 08-09 Islanders team was very bad. They were the worst team in the league that season, and 61 points for them that year. Pretty brutal. Moving on now to number 8, we have the 05-06 Pittsburgh Penguins. This Penguins team, this was back when the Penguins were in severe danger of possibly being moved out of Pittsburgh. The team had been struggling for a while, and they certainly were struggling at this point in the coming out of the lockout. 22, 46, and 14 on the season for 58 points and a -72 goal differential. This was obviously a really bad year for them. It did lead to them getting the number 2 overall pick. This was also Sidney Crosby's rookie year in the NHL. It did lead to them getting the number 2 overall pick, which resulted in Jordan Staal, who then became a huge part of that team moving forward, especially part of the teams that got them to back-to-back Stanley Cups in 2008 and 2009 before moving on to signing with the Carolina Hurricanes. So some good certainly did come out of it, and Pittsburgh got a lot better, pretty quickly after this season. But that 05-06 season was pretty brutal for the Pittsburgh Penguins. However, they were not the worst team in the league that year. The worst team in the league is number 7 in 05-06. The worst team in the league that year is number 7 on the list. It's the St. Louis Blues, who finished that season with a record of 21, 46, and 15, a -95 goal differential and only 57 points on the season. Awful year for St. Louis. That was bad enough to get them the number 1 overall pick in the draft that year. And with that pick, they drafted Erik Johnson. Now, Erik Johnson's a good NHL player and turned into a good NHL player. Probably not worth a number 1 overall pick, though, and I think that they do probably wish they did better with that first overall pick. But nonetheless, the Blues did over the years get better and turn into a pretty solid playoff contender for much of the past 10 to 15 years. And obviously they won the Stanley Cup last season, so it didn't damage them long term or anything like that, but just could have done a little bit better with that pick. But still, the 05-06 Blues, 57 points, number 7 on the list. Number 6, we have the Philadelphia Flyers from the next season, 2006-2007. 56 points on the year, 22, 48, and 12 record, a negative 89 goal differential. They were the worst team in the league in 06-07. And that led to them getting the number 2 overall pick in the NHL draft. They had gotten number 1. Patrick Kane would have not been a Chicago Blackhawk. He would have been a Philadelphia Flyer. Instead, the Flyers had to settle for JVR at number 2, James Van Riemsdyk. And I would say that worked out pretty well, as JVR's turned into a very good goal scorer. Was a huge part of the Flyers team that just 3 years later, in 2009-2010, went to the Stanley Cup Final before losing to Patrick Kane's Chicago Blackhawks. But JVR was a big part of those Flyers kind of rebuild and rebound into being a good team again. And then obviously he went to Toronto, and now he's back in Philadelphia. So there's number 6. Now we're getting into the top 5 here, the 5 worst teams since the 2005 lockout in the salary cap era. And number 5 is the Arizona Coyotes from the 2014-15 season. They finished the season just 24, 50, and 8 for 56 points and a minus 102 goal differential. A minus 102 goal differential and just 56 points on the year. Absolutely brutal season for Arizona. That led to them getting the number 3 overall pick in the entry draft that year. Again, 2015 draft. Oilers got number 1. Buffalo, who we'll talk about coming up, got number 2. Coyotes got number 3, and with that pick, they drafted Dylan Strome, who they then traded last season to Chicago and got Nick Schmaltz in return. So basically, that pick kind of turned into Nick Schmaltz, and he's become a pretty good player for the Coyotes. Not sure if Strome was exactly the right pick at number 3 there, but it's turned out okay for Arizona, and they have at least a playoff contending team now, where they're on that playoff line. Next up at number 4, we have the 2014-15 same season Buffalo Sabres, who were slightly worse than the Arizona Coyotes, going 23, 51, and 8 for 54 points that season and a negative 113 goal differential. I mean, absolutely brutal season there for Buffalo. Which we've seen a lot with Buffalo over the past 10 years or so. It's been a lot of brutal seasons for them. But on the good news is they got the number 2 overall pick in the NHL draft that year. They missed out on McDavid, but they got Jack Eichel, and I think we all know how Jack Eichel has turned out. He's become an absolute superstar for the Sabres. Doesn't have much help, which is why the Sabres are still one of the worst teams in the league. But Jack Eichel individually has been outstanding, having an MVP type season this year, and really at this point is the Buffalo Sabres. So that moves us on to number 3, the 3rd worst team in the salary cap era in the NHL is once again the Buffalo Sabres. This time the year before, from the team that we just talked about, the 2013-14 Buffalo Sabres finished the season just 21, 51, and 10 for 52 points in the entire year. 52 points in the entire year. A negative 91 goal differential. And once again, they got the number 2 overall pick in the 2014 draft. And with that, they selected Sam Reinhart. And boy, oh boy, Sam Reinhart's a decent player. He's having a solid year this year, but he was definitely probably not worth the number 2 overall pick. They could have done better there. That was a bit of a miss. Now, the good news for them is they got Eichel at number 2 the next year, which was a absolute home run. But missing with that pick and not getting Leon Draisaitl in 2014 and getting Sam Reinhart instead was a miss for the Buffalo Sabres. So that brings us to number 2, and I think this is one that you guys will all remember, the 2016-17 Colorado Avalanche. One of the worst teams in not just the salary cap era of the NHL, one of the worst teams in NHL history. 22, 56, and 4 on the season. 56 regulation losses out of 82 games. Just 48 points on the season. So far, the only team that has not reached 50 points in an NHL season in the modern era since the salary cap came in. And a minus 112 goal differential. And to make matters worse, they thought they were going to get the #1 overall pick that year. Obviously, they were by far the worst team in the league that season. In the draft lottery, they dropped all the way down to #4. They did not even get a top 3 pick. And at the time, that seemed like a huge loss for Colorado. As it turns out, with that #4 overall pick, they got Cale Makar, who is becoming an absolute superstar for them. Is a dynamic force on the back end. I think is going to be a Norris Trophy winner for them. And when you look at Nico Hischier taking #1, Nolan Patrick taking #2, and Miro Heiskanen taking #3, I mean, Cale Makar might be the best player out of all of them. Even though Colorado dropped to #4, they still might have gotten the best player out of all of them taken in the top 4, because Hischier's a pretty good player. He's been a really good player for New Jersey, but not a dynamic, game-changing player. Nolan Patrick hasn't even been playing this season because of migraine issues, and I hope that he can get that figured out and can have a solid NHL career. But he's kind of been a flop as far as the #2 overall pick goes, and a lot of it's due to injury and head issues with him, not necessarily his fault. And Miro Heiskanen is a very good offensive defenseman for the Dallas Stars, but I think Cale Makar is a more all-around dynamic player. So even though Colorado dropped to #4 in the draft that year, I think they still got the best player, and Cale Makar is going to be an absolute superstar for them. But that's #2, and that leads us to #1. And I haven't talked about him yet, so you probably know who this is. It's this season's Detroit Red Wings, the 2019-2020 Red Wings. Season, obviously now suspended. We don't know how this is going to finish out, but as of now, through 71 games played, the Red Wings are 17, 49, and 5 with a minus 122 goal differential and just 39 points on the season. If the NHL does come back and finish out the current regular season and play a full 82 games, I still don't think the Red Wings are going to catch the year before, or the 2017 Avalanche's 48 points. I think the Red Wings will finish with less than 48 points. I think they could finish with less than 20 wins, which would also be a first in this era. And their goal differential has the potential to get down in the negative 130s. And that is absolutely brutal. I think this is the worst team that we have seen in the NHL since the lockout, is this year's Detroit Red Wings. They are absolutely horrible. Obviously, big time in rebuild mode right now, but they are a really, really, really bad team. And I think that they're worse than the 2017 Avalanche. I think they are the worst that we have seen since 2005. So, yeah, really, really tough season. We'll see if they finish out the year and if we get hockey back this season, and we can see how this team ends up, through a full 82 game season, or we don't know what's going to happen with this virus situation. Hopefully, we get hockey back soon. But I truly believe that the 2019-20 Red Wings are the worst NHL team we have seen since the lockout. Even worse than that 2017 Avalanche team. But there you have it, guys. The 10 worst teams in the NHL since the 2005 lockout in the salary cap era. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Follow on social media. All those links are down in the description below. If you'd like to further support the channel, links to our Patreon and merchandise store are down in the description as well. Keep spreading the word about this channel. Let's keep this thing growing. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you guys soon.